I did shave some of my tires
Damn it, Carol!
into the coffee ground. I thought that it would be nice, you know?
Oh, you get a little of that like road flavor.
Road rash. It's called road rash.
Well, that's what
coffee.
you get after you drink that coffee.
Butterscotch. Welcome to episode 66 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. My name is Sam, and I make art things.
My name is Adam, and I don't do that.
My name's Carol, and I don't know.
Carol doesn't even know. Today is September 28th, 2016. I just got a little warning for you. Anything could happen on this show. Profanity, lewdness, nudeness, rudeness.
Tudness.
Ooh, root and tuden.
Root and
Root and
tuden.
tuden, good times. So shouldn't be listened to by children. So if you're a kid, go away real quick. And you might notice that this week, Seth isn't down here in the podcast dungeon. Why is
He's
that?
upstairs in his disease dungeon.
Mm-hmm. He's been quarantined.
So the problem is that his house is the office. So all of us came in and ran downstairs, and then we're probably just going to throw him sandwiches, I guess, over the course of the day to keep him alive. But he's upstairs trapped in his room because he's sick and gross.
Yep.
Yeah.
Offerings of sandwiches to the disease gods.
Mm-hmm.
We all came in just with gas masks on, trying to avoid the plague. It's really interesting that we just got back from XPO in Oklahoma, and he was somehow the only one who actually got sick.
Do you think he got it from the show floor or from the airplane? Because
That's a
both
good
are high
question.
disease vectors, but
Well, I was sitting right next to him on the airplane, and so unless he was like
Yeah, on both
licking
trips,
the
right?
seat
Yep.
or
You know,
licking
Seth,
the passenger next to us,
since he's not here, we can just talk about him.
we
And
could
he
just
does
assume he was.
have a
does,
tendency to lick seats. It's
He
like
does
his
that.
thing.
Yeah, and he has a coward's immune system.
Yeah, that is true.
Because he gets sick literally
He does.
every time we go somewhere.
He gets
Really?
sick actually as much as I do, doesn't he?
Yeah.
When
He
you're-
has a
And he
baby.
doesn't even have an excuse.
Yeah.
He has a baby immune system just like you, but it's
Yeah.
not a baby. It is just.
Just a weak grown ass man.
I wonder if there's like some sort of a inverse correlation between muscles and immune system.
Oh, there might be.
Like the muscles actually suck up all of your immunity.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It
it
all
is
just
the
like
case.
is in there because
Yeah.
all your blood is just in your muscles and it can't move anywhere. So it's just like
trapped.
It's just trapped in your muscles. So he might like all of his immunity might be like in a finger or something and it can't get out.
What if it's like lymph nodes, where your lymph node swells up when you're sick? Maybe he's sick all the time.
Oh.
And his
That's
the
muscles are
secret.
just swollen disease
So he has some
bags.
sort of weird genetic deformation where instead of lymph nodes, he just has muscles.
Yeah.
And all the muscles carry lymph around.
That's really gross.
That's probably what it is.
Well, let's talk about XPO. So I didn't go. I didn't go for the exact reason of trying to dodge getting super sick. So
Good work on you.
I did it, and Adam took my space, and he didn't get sick. So I feel
Not
good
yet.
about this.
Yeah.
Although Seth is now a disease vector.
That's
of
true.
Maximum magnitude.
Everybody might end up getting sick anyways.
He's just like secreting phlegm from every orifice.
He's
Yeah.
spraying it out like a fire hydrant. But yeah, so tell me about XPO. How was it? What was the situation? You know, how was Tulsa?
XPO. So XPO is in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mhm.
It's their first time doing it. They've been prepping it for 3 years or something like
it's
that.
been a while.
So it's kind of a big project for them, and they're trying to start to make a games community in that area. So they had this big event. But again, it was their first time, so they had a huge struggle trying to tell people about it and get people to show up and all that kind of stuff. But they invested a lot in bringing people in. So they had a lot of exhibitors. It was all indie stuff, but it was included the likes of what was the game right next to us?
We Happy Few.
We Happy Few.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
Just Shapes and Beats.
Yeah.
And I Expect You to Die, which is a really cool VR game.
A bunch of VR stuff.
Yeah, they had a lot of VR. Probably at least half of the games there were VR,
No
which was
way.
really interesting to me because like I don't like playing games in public because I don't like feeling watched while I play. I like to be in the dark alone on my couch playing something and just
So-
experiencing it independently. And so when somebody walks up to you and like straps a thing on your face and you can't go anywhere and it's really obvious when you take it off and you're like, I don't want this.
I was going to say, if you have to move your body around while you're not able to see how ridiculous you look, is that like it's like an extreme version of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's total performance anxiety in public, especially when the dev is there. And so, yeah, when I'm like, I can't even see what I'm doing. I have no, like, I've used very few VR sets.
Yeah. Is it better being blinded so that while people are watching you can't see them?
I want to tell a little story about that because in my my senior year of high school. We had our assignment in biology was to rewrite the words of a pop song to explain a biology concept. So
I remember doing that.
ours was the song "Apologize" by Timbaland.
Is that
Yeah.
it's too late?
So ours was about fertilization.
I did a similar thing for mine that was about sperm.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
Well,
teenage
apparently
boys.
that's what it is.
Let's
So
just write a song about jism.
So it was me and my
apologize for
two
using
friends
that
wrote all the lyrics out, practiced it a few times, and then the day of, one of my buddies was like, "Hey, I have these sunglasses. Like, we should all wear sunglasses when we do it, even though we're in a room." He's like, "We'll turn the lights off. We're gonna turn that crazy Mac screensaver on, where it's like a piece of plasma flying around, and blast that onto the back wall."
Like
And then
in a DJ set.
yeah, and then you just put the sunglasses on, and once you have those on, you'll be fine. Like, you can go. And I remember, like, all of us put the things on, the whole thing set up, and just sang like crazy people, terribly, but just sang this thing out. And I remember taking off the glasses and being like, "Oh shit," because it was not like, it wasn't dark. It wasn't the case that we were in like a concert hall. You know, it gave us a sort of mask of.
Yeah.
It gave us a mask so that we could actually perform
Yeah.
more realistically than if we like I would have been so nervous without those things on. I realized afterwards. I think there's a lot of power to having that mask on your face in terms of getting you in the zone for something.
That's magical.
I just remembered, by the way, that it was actually, the song was "We Are Flagellum" that I sang for
remember this.
mine.
Yeah.
Yep.
to the
It was
tune of
about
what?
"We Are the Champions."
We
So it
are-
wasn't actually about sperm. It was about flagellum, but of course there was a line about sperm there because, like,
Right.
Of course. Okay.
as you do.
So
I forgot about
to
that.
get back to Sam's point, I totally understand that for performance.
Yeah.
But for playing a game and trying to solve puzzles, the fact that most of these headsets have speakers or you're wearing headphones or something, and yet still somehow the dev was trying to talk to me. And so like they're trying to direct me, but I can't really hear them. And so I also can't really hear the game, and I can't see anything that's around me. And my glasses make it uncomfortable to wear. And so I was just in this space of like total self-consciousness
Interesting. Yeah.
and the pure inability to actually do anything. And so I didn't actually finish a V. I played 2 and I didn't finish either. Although one of them started making me kind of feel sick.
Yeah. There's also that.
So I was like, I need to stop before I barf on your computer.
Well, there was a report that one of the first, supposedly the first VR game to make $1 million happened. So you're right. I don't remember which one it was.
Wait, I was going to say, which game even was that?
It's an article on Games Industry. I can't remember which project it was, but
That was in revenue, though.
yeah, in revenue.
Probably the
Definitely.
costs are very
Yeah.
high.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, probably not in profit. But there's an interesting follow up to it where they're basically saying it's the whole "there will be blood" scenario where like because it's sort of acting as a pseudo gold mine again for
Yeah.
kind of like mobile was, and so there's a lot of people rushing into the space, but the market itself is not particularly mature yet, and so it's gonna be a bit of a wild ride, I think, for the next few years. For
It
a lot
is.
Of
I
VR
think
people.
it won't grow nearly as fast as the mobile
No.
scene did because the sheer amount of equipment required to do it.
Like the ubiquity of a mobile device
Yeah.
is exactly why mobile was able to grow. And the fact that VR costs a lot for a headset and then a lot for the hardware.
Yep.
And is also really uncomfortable in a lot of cases.
And it's very hard to develop for. Because
Yeah.
unlike mobile, where today you can make an app in literally 10 minutes and put it on the App Store half an hour later, right?
Yeah.
You cannot do that for VR and will not ever be able to because the kind of experience that you need to create for it is just a much bigger kind of broader experience.
Yeah, something interesting. I actually just saw somebody post on Twitter, like a warning to developers for VR that as you develop for VR, you become desensitized to the feelings that you get as you play.
Yeah, I'm sure that's
And
true.
so a lot of developers apparently will create games that do make people sick that they don't realize it. And it's also obviously a working hazard of being a developer is that you regularly get sick while you're
Right.
playing your own games.
Right.
It's just, I
so
think that
interesting.
is not something that I think a lot of people think about when they think about developing for VR, that there's an actual, concern
mental cost.
Yeah. of-
What I heard with Mortal Kombat, even it's like in developing a very violent video game.
Yeah. You'll necessarily get desensitized to it.
With some of the stuff, but they said the animators are different because they don't use the animators sort of like try to one up each other. So they have a sort of because they're looking at just shapes and models. They're not actually looking at the full on blood and gore stuff, and so they just make these ridiculous things, and then when they actually see them in the game, it's, horrifying. But the guy who has to go in there and like paint the guts. There's a guy who like painted guts in Mortal Kombat, like a lot of guts, and apparently, it kind of wears on you a bit, as you would expect, So
yeah, I remember I was one of the more recent Mortal Kombats. Like I haven't played any of that game for a long, long time, but I saw some clip of one of the finishing moves in that
they're
thing,
incredible,
where somebody just gets like ripped in half down the middle, and like and I was like, it was literally the most gory, horrifying thing
it's disgusting.
I'd seen,
Real
and
gross.
I've never ever looked into Mortal Kombat since that.
I did go through and watch all the fatalities because they are truly incredible. I mean, from an animation perspective, and also just the sheer creativity in destruction, incredible, really gross.
It's horrifying.
Anyways, back to Expo.
Yeah.
So
XPO.
So you guys did. You checked out the VR games, hung out on the floor.
Yeah.
It's pretty good chatting with all the devs and stuff.
The possibly only in existence Nintendo PlayStation was there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I got to play Street Fighter with the guitarist from Bit Brigade,
Oh, awesome.
which is one of the bands that was playing. They play all kinds of game events over the country, and the Bit Brigade sets were amazing.
So can you tell me what do they do for Bit Brigade?
So they play live music. So there's a guy in the band who plays NES and just plays live. And at XPO they played
Mega Man
Metroid and Mega Man. Yeah.
Is he like a speedrunner?
Kind of.
Okay.
So I've never really watched speedruns in my life because I don't usually care to. But I sat down and watched this, and it was just completely mesmerizing to see this guy playing live, trying to sync it up with the with where the musicians were. And then, obviously really, really good, just rock music, rock renditions of the soundtracks.
Very cool.
It was mesmerizing.
Yeah, so the musicians are live accompanying the gameplay. So anytime something happens, they sort of change what they're doing to match it.
Yeah. But these guys were at PAX, and that's actually where we first met them. And then they apparently play MagFest every year, which is it's the Music and Games Festival. It's huge. And it was really awesome to see them in this really tiny space with there was maybe 30 or 40 people in the audience. So
this
you could
intimate concert.
Perfect view of the stage, perfect view of everything going on. But yeah, it was some cool stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a small event. I think I'm not sure if they got as many people as they were hoping for. I think overall it was a good experience. There were sort of two key flaws in the whole thing that hopefully they improve next year, but that had to do with just the timing of stuff. Because it was a Friday through a Sunday. Sunday was a half day. Friday was, of course, during most people's work day. It's a brand new thing that nobody's heard of before and seen. And so they had, a ticket price and like a weekend pass. But because Sunday was only a half day, it doesn't really make any sense to buy a 1 day ticket for Sunday, which meant almost everybody who came to the event came on Saturday.
Interesting.
So Saturday was actually nice and busy, and it was, really fun and engaging. And then Friday and Sunday, because those are both basically half days for people, were just really empty.
But they were chill. I mean, the people who
it was
were
still
there
a good
were
time, right?
super friendly and super engaged.
Yep.
We sold a bunch of t-shirts. It was a lot of fun. So, yeah. And I it was a really great opportunity. So most of the developers who were there were not from Oklahoma. There were a couple of developers from the area, but pretty much everybody came in from far away, as far as Canada.
Yeah.
And so it was a really cool opportunity to just get to know pretty much everyone who was there, which you don't get at something like a PAX.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, having a smaller convention
too
has
busy.
it has its own advantages in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, we made some good friends there, and it was just, it was really memorable in that capacity.
I think, I mean, it always reminds me of when we started the St. Louis Game Jam and the meetup here, because it was literally 4 people at that first game jam.
Right.
And the thing is, the first one's always just the hardest. And we talk about this in game dev too. It's the same thing. I mean, getting your first successful game out is always the hardest thing because no one's paying attention. No one knows who you are. No one trusts you at all. And it's the same thing when you're doing community events and stuff like that. So I do hope they continue to do it because it sounds like it was all the parts were there. It's just one of those things that might need some time to grow.
I actually have a funny story about the first St. Louis Game Jam that I don't know that I've ever told you.
What's that?
I remember being invited to come to this by your old boss, Nick.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember them stopping me and being like, I know you guys really like making games. This was before we started making games with my old studio. He's like, I know you guys are really into games, so y'all should come to this thing. It's called a game jam, and we're just going to be in the office. There's going to be a handful of us. We're just going to make games all weekend. And I was like, being in a small space with a bunch of stinky dudes. Please, God, no. And now game jams are like my favorite thing in the world.
And now
So
you're
it
in a
is.
space with like 250 stinky people.
Oh, yeah. And it's very stinky, but it's so good.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I wish I would have known what a game jam actually was because I would have loved to participate in that.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I ever told you that I actively rejected.
Refused to go. Thanks, Carol, for crushing my hopes and dreams way earlier.
There's a true hurdle there though, because if it's not obvious, that would be
Fun.
a good experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. Let's go work for 48 hours straight.
With a bunch of strangers.
With a bunch of strangers who smell weird.
in an enclosed space. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard sell when you put it like that, you know?
But for those of you listening, if you've never gone to a game jam, you should go to a game jam because they're amazing.
And you should bring deodorant and maybe bring some extras and just hand them off to
Just,
people.
anytime you see someone, just, hey,
take
you
this
got a
deodorant.
little stench going on,
Yeah,
have a little
bring
baby
some extra
stick.
mouthwash, some gum.
That's something I really want to start putting into the goodie bags for the St.
Mhm.
Louis Game Jam. We
Yeah.
always have
Oh,
freebies.
yeah.
So we'll have free shirts.
Do you think you can
and
get a sponsor for
I really want to.
See if you can get Old Spice.
Old Spice? Yeah.
Do they make ladies deodorant? Because I don't want it to seem like
What
it's
about
just
Degree?
Degree's good. Degree's fine.
Is it
It's strong enough for a man, but made for what's the
It's
Made
pH
for a woman?
balanced. pH balanced.
strong enough for a man,
But pH
balanced for a woman?
That's the line.
There's no way.
Yeah, it is.
No way.
I believe that for a second.
pH balanced. Nonsense.
I don't even know what that means in the context of a deodorant.
It doesn't
Like,
mean anything.
Like when you
important.
put like one of those pH strips under your arm, it turns pink instead of
Turns
blue.
out it's a 7, so you're at neutral.
I want one of the most highly acidic deodorants I could find.
you wanna
such
burn
that
your
just
armpits
burn the
off.
armpit. Yeah, just burn everything
Actually,
I've
off.
had
if-
deodorants that do that.
yeah.
Although I
mean, some of them-
shave.
Oh,
My
Yeah, so
armpits?
it's just probably is where it is.
Ow.
Ow.
All right, let's move on to some industry news.
Let's stop
Can we-
talking about Carol's clean shaven armpits.
And the stinging that comes with improperly pH balanced deodorant. So some interesting industry stuff's been going on. One of which is that, a few weeks ago, we talked about the Steam store's changes to the review system.
Mm-hmm.
And Steam's always working on improving their storefront to kind of stem the tide of problems that come with having a shitload of games on a platform, which they're already at, and they're of course ever increasing how many games are on there every day. So they're making another suite of changes to the storefront, which I'm not sure if they're out right now or if they're rolling out over the next week or so.
But they're coming soon anyway.
They're coming very quick, and the whole thing is it's got a lot of really interesting sort of curious changes to see how exactly they impact most
Well, we should
devs.
say before we talk about it that the main problem that developers and stores face is a discoverability problem
Mhm.
because there are enormous numbers of games, enormous numbers of players,
Mhm.
and matching those up to maximize getting everybody what they want. Because if you give players what they want, they buy stuff.
And this
then
is an issue on
Developers get paid.
this is an issue on almost every platform that's
Yeah,
out
of course.
there, and especially the bigger it is.
Yep. The more games there are,
Mhm.
harder it is to get the right game to the right person.
Yeah, and there's even a problem for companies like Netflix who do the movie thing where they recommend
Oh, yeah.
movies. They actually had an algorithm competition, which I think was worth like a $1 million competition
Yeah.
for a better algorithm a few years ago. And because the whole problem is exactly that, which is okay, you have someone's history of what they've bought, you have their history of what their friends have also bought, which sort of can lightly influence it. Given the fact that we have a couple hundred games coming out every day, which ones should you actually show them is kind of what the question ends up being. The old model is essentially more of what you see on mobile or really any older storefront where they just have an editorial feature board where the editors choose the things that people get to see. And while that's great as far as whoever gets those editorial positions, it ends up doing this weird thing where a lot of times any given player may not actually see something on the App Store or see something on Steam or Google Play that they necessarily want, maybe for like a period of weeks, potentially, depending on what they're into. And so the coolest thing about this is that Steam already did a few changes with this, I think last year, a year and a half ago, called the discoverability queue. And the whole point was just to, again, use people's data of what they've already bought and then serve them up 10 games that they could flip through and say, I'm interested or not interested, or just buy it. And
they even gave you rewards for flipping through all those games.
yeah. And so I think it's been really successful for them. I think they published some numbers on it about how it bumped revenue across the board by like 20%,
Wow.
which is nuts.
Yeah.
Right. And so the whole point is like,
Yeah, it
this-
turns out if you give people access to the things they want, then they'll buy
Yeah.
those thing.
Yeah. So a lot of the changes to the storefront actually have to do with this discoverability problem, as probably will be most of the changes from here on out. So they're doing a sort of a refresh on the homepage as far as looks and stuff, cleaning it up a little bit, getting rid of some distracting information, and then they're basically adding a curation page or a curation section. So curators that you follow actually will be whatever games that they suggest will be in their specific place on the homepage.
So they'll actually make more of an impact on your
Theoretically.
on your shopping.
Yeah.
Because I think that's been the biggest complaint so far is that Steam curators,
They're sort of sidelined a little bit.
it's harder to find what they're actually suggesting unless you drill down and actually look at their specific page.
Yep.
And then there's they're highlighting friends as well, what your friends are playing recently. That's going to be a new sort of thing.
Oh, cool.
And the biggest change for us on our end is, as devs, it used to be the case that when you launch your game on Steam, you just get a blanket X number of eyeballs on it as the first sort of pass for your launch. It's like 1 million or so impressions on the front page, and that's essentially you being rotated into the editorial queue. Just algorithmically, and then depending how well you did, they would surface you more or less.
Yes, they would measure your click-through rate and how many people buy the game and that kind of stuff.
Right. And so the interesting thing that they're doing now, though, is, of course, they just pointed out that it's not a very good model because the click-through rates are abysmally low. No matter, even if it's a really successful game, it doesn't matter because they're surfacing it to so many people. And so what they'll do is actually changing it to essentially giving you less overall visibility, but much more highly targeted visibility. So in other words, they target it toward people who, given the genre and other things about your game, are more likely to buy it anyways.
Although, if they're doing this at launch, that means they don't have the data they would need to do good targeting.
Yeah, you won't have user targeting. But this is the interesting thing. They're also changing how they do the update featuring. So whenever we want, we can actually we can essentially cause what's called a visibility round to happen for our game. And at that point, it sort of resurfaces in a little tiny space on the Steam homepage. We've done this once before, and we noticed that nothing happened, basically. So I think
a bit happened, but it wasn't. It was nothing like what happens with a sale or something like that.
And that's even though it gets surfaced on the front page. And so they're making a big change to that as well, which is doing the same thing, where the targeting of that, basically the whole point is that the targeting is just getting way better, supposedly.
So they'll bring you to a smaller number of people, but bring the visibility up, so that instead of just being a little tiny thing in that little queue, you might like go up into the carousel.
I believe so. Yeah. Okay. And so the whole idea is just to move toward more and heavier user targeting. So I'm really curious to see what actually happens with this. And I think it's also surprising. We talked about this before, but it's always been surprising to us that the mobile stores haven't been quite as keen on implementing these sorts of store changes. And I mean, Google Play is a little bit better about it, and we can tell with our as far as our tail goes, it seems like people discover the game a little bit easier when it's not featured. But even then, like they're pretty far behind as far as solving this discoverability problem.
Although, I mean, it's like if you open up the Google Play Store these days, though, most of what you see is actually stuff recommended for you.
Yeah, that's true.
So it is mostly, statistically curated based on what you've already done. And I know that certainly when I look at my recommended stuff versus like the top lists, that's a way better.
Yeah.
The top list is just garbage, right? It's just like, here's the random stuff that is trying to pull all the money out of my pocket, right?
Yeah,
right.
The things that the general public likes that you will absolutely despise.
Right.
And even then, I'm not sure that that's what the public would like, right? That's what they've been served.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, the big problem with these kinds of discoverability things is that it's a positive reinforcement of whatever you have been exposed to before, right? So if you boot up the App Store, Google Play for the first time, and all you're going to really see is, the top grossing games list, because that's what they want to show you, because that's where most of the money comes from. And so you see that, or the newest games, which are going to be basically clones of all those for the most part. So you go download a few of those, the first games you see, and then now your curated list is going to be just like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so now you look at your selection, and now it's games that are just like that. So you download a few from there. Now your created list is even more like that, right? So it becomes a positive feedback loop where if you're not exposed to enough diversity from the beginning, then you end up in an echo chamber where all you see is the stuff that you first saw. And it
kind of sounds like the internet in general.
It absolutely is the internet in general. But so the problem with these kinds of, and this is the thing we talked about with like Facebook a while ago, right? Where they're only showing people pictures of babies because they know people like babies, right? Which is it's the main reason I don't actually use Facebook, is because I don't want to see people's
Adam
fucking
hates
babies.
babies.
I do.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
It's fine. I hide
They're
all of
just
those
gross.
posts.
Yeah.
I think you
exactly.
unfriend people, but I just hide them.
I do, yeah.
I love babies.
I've started just hiding people instead. I guess.
Okay. That's
Better political
Yeah.
move, I think.
I hate you now that you have a baby. We're not friends.
But yeah, so you have to get this echo chamber problem, and then how do you break out of that?
Yeah.
The only way to do it is to seed in stuff that you haven't seen before that's outside of your genre.
Right.
So to me, my big worry with these kinds of changes is the one huge advantage of having one curated list or have everything have a fair chance of appearing on the front page for everybody is that it basically seeds diversity into your queue of things that you want to go check out, because otherwise you would never even see those things and never have the opportunity to look at them and make a decision for yourself. Does this look like something that's interesting?
Unless you were willing to explore the charts and things like that.
And the vast majority of people are not.
Well,
The vast majority of people, and most people don't even know, like don't even think about it. They just look at what's there. If something looks interesting, they go buy it. And otherwise they play games that are already in their list. And so I think it is definitely going to boost revenue across the board. I guess I'd be surprised if it didn't, because people will buy things that they like, right? So people enjoy being in their little echo chambers. But in terms of diversifying people's tastes and understanding of what games can be and all that, I think it's actually going to be a net negative. Probably.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that's what's happened sort of across the board. I think this is true for Netflix too. Like the stuff that I get shown on Netflix is exactly the stuff that I want to watch. Right.
Right.
That's true.
Which is like action-y, badly written cop shows and stuff, right? Because that's the stuff I love, just like burn time on. But I don't actually see stuff that might also be interesting to me. And of course, usually I wouldn't watch it anyway, right? But every once in a while, if something piques my interest enough, then I'll go diversify.
I mean, it's almost like having a sort of a stumble upon option would be kind of a cool thing to do.
Even stumble upon, you curate though.
That's true. Yeah.
You tell it what you like first.
Yeah. They should have like wild cards. They're just like, hey, we don't know if you're gonna like this, but you've looked at 300 things.
Right.
I mean,
So
I think that makes
different.
sense. I think it would be really interesting, especially from a game curation standpoint, to offer what we would recommend and then find something that's just a little fringe and just start putting those little kind of slightly more diverse elements in there. Just one or two, if you always only play these kind of desaturated AAA games with big beefy men holding guns, and then we pop in something like Hyperlight Drifter, would you click on it?
Right.
Yep.
Although
even better if you throw in something like Enter the Gungeon.
Right.
Because you love guns, right?
Here's
But now
some
you can
pixel
diversify.
guns. Yeah.
Because to me, it's actually the way that the way it worked for me anyway, is that to diversify your tastes and experiences, you always need to just take a small step into some other thing, right? So you take an aspect of the stuff that you love, and if you just keep on following that trajectory, you can end up enjoying just about anything. I mean, for me, I almost only played first-person shooters for a long time. And I don't remember what games. I think it was actually mostly Portal, probably Portal and Half-Life 2, that kind of pulled me out of that, even though those are still first-person games, but they're now like really puzzly. And then Half-Life 2 has a strong narrative component, and it's still a puzzle game because of the gravity gun, right? And it was really those two games, because they weren't the strict first-person shooter kill everything experience that I had really just like glommed onto, allowed me to see something interesting about other kinds of games.
Yeah. There's more to the world than murder.
Yeah. And so I think a cool algorithm would be to actually identify games that sort of like bridge genres and stuff, And so people who are like deep in a genre, try to show them stuff that's similar but is actually different, so that we can pull them slowly out of
Right.
it.
Well, this is actually something I was gonna ask the question of. From a statistical point of view, is it not the case then that the genre that you choose to launch your game under? So Crashlands is an interesting example because it straddles like 6 different things.
Yeah. How do you decide what
So,
genre a game like Crashlands
right? So
is?
if you say we have RPG, we have adventure, we have narrative driven,
we have
blah,
crafting.
blah, blah. We have crafting. So, which a lot of people associate with survival, right? Even though it's not a survival game. But you have to understand that from a marketing standpoint. And so the question is now, how big of a deal do you think it's going to be as far as which one of those genres you choose at launch, and what, what I'm saying? Like what sort of statistical fallout is it going to be?
Because if they don't, because the way that these normally work is they take data on who's bought the game and who looks at it, what their click-through rates are, et cetera. And then they say, well, all these people bought the game and you statistically are like those people. Therefore, we'll show you that same game because you'll probably like it, right? But when nobody has clicked on it yet, because nobody's seen it yet, that data isn't there.
So they're gonna have to go by the genre tags
if they're gonna target.
That's the only thing.
That's the only thing that they have. Yeah. And that kind of targeting is gonna be really weird because right now genre, as we know from digging into the stats on these things, basically doesn't have a consequence on Steam because it's mostly meaningless anyway. But also because of the way the system works, just genre isn't important. It doesn't do anything. Yeah, you can, curate a list by genre, but because genre doesn't mean anything, then every time you do that, you just see a bunch of stuff that's really different. So who gives a shit, right? So probably it's really completely underutilized. But if you start making it seem important by making it so that, but I don't even know how you would do that. Like, are they just literally going to say this person plays a lot of games with the tag
RPG,
survival?
right.
This one was defined by the developers to be survival. Right. So we'll show it to those players.
Maybe. I mean, they haven't surfaced exactly how they're doing it, of course.
Because if that's true, that's all this thing going to require us to we'll need to buckle down and do a lot of stats again.
Well, that's the thing. So this always ends up with whenever these changes happen, there's a concept of App Store optimization, which in the game dev world basically means choosing what keywords and what definitions to use, what descriptions to use, and blah blah, such that your game gets surfaced to as many people as possible.
Yeah. And it's super tough to make those decisions, and it's super hit and miss.
Yeah, and you'll see anytime you see a game on the App Store that has a name that's like 100 characters long, where they're like puzzle game with dragons, explosions, adventure quest, or whatever. That's actually what they're doing. Is they're playing the App Store optimization. SEO. They're just trying to make it so that whenever you search for something roughly in their domain, that you end up seeing their thing.
Right.
So you kind of run into this problem again, where it's like, okay, so once people identify what the highest number of people fall into as far as like general genre playing category. So if it's RPG, for example, and we do know this from mobile, like less people play more complex games. So strategy games, 4X games, that sort of things have a smaller audience.
So they are more likely to pay for those games.
Yes. Then something like an action arcade game or an RPG, simple RPG. So my question then becomes, do you just start slapping tags on?
Just
irresponsible slab
tags all over.
Tag slapping.
Well, but the one thing that Steam has that the other platforms don't, as far as I know, is user supplied tags.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
but you can't have those at launch, is my point.
No, you can't have those at launch, but you'll very quickly accumulate those if you show it to enough people. So to me, this is the main problem: is that there's going to be some weird, if they're going to, once you go away from the blanket, everybody sees it, and at least at the initial outset, right? Then you're going to have to bias the outcome in some way,
right? By
deciding who to show it to, and as soon as you do that, if you only show it to people, so if you take a game and only show it to people who like RPGs, for example, then those people are going to, maybe they'll go add some user supplied tags, but those will be done by people who mostly love RPGs, right?
Yeah, right?
They'll have a certain way of approaching games. They'll tag it in a certain way.
Interesting.
And that could be another feedback loop. So now all of a sudden, so then I guess now think about the other scenario. If you take the same game, so take Crashlands. If you take the same game and put it into the survival category instead, now all of a sudden it's not a survival game. So people play it and they're like, fuck this game. So they lower the rating a bit, right? And they tag it with things that probably for them are like, they're trying to push it out of the survival category.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it's got a lower rating, and it's got a more diverse and different set of tags than it would have had it gone to the RPG crowd first. And those are positive feedback loops,
right? Because
of now it will be shown to people who.
So it's the interesting thing where it's like, so in the original case where you just show the game to 1 million people and say who's going to buy it,
you have an unbiased intro.
Right? Yeah. So the question here basically becomes, what if Steam chooses wrong?
Exactly.
That's essentially what the question.
Well, it's not even wrong. It's that there is no right choice. Right. And whatever they choose will bias forever the downstream outcome. So
that's a terrifying prospect.
Great. It absolutely is. Like, I mean, to me,
oh my God.
the only way to get around it is to have a really intense like survey or something about the game that a developer has to fill out that like adds all these details about the game so they can try to match it up with existing games. Or just to have this blanket, everybody sees it at the very beginning policy. And then you seed it. And I think, personally, I think that's the best way is have a system like Steam's, not like the app stores necessarily, where there's a highly manually curated set, but instead have more like what Steam has, where everybody gets a shot, right? Every game that gets launched will be shown to some number of people, like at the top of the store, so that because if you do that with enough people and you allow people to contribute information, a diverse group of people, as opposed to a very highly selected. So you take a diverse, huge group of people, let them all decide whether they're going to download it or not, because they're making the decisions, right? The group is making the decisions, and then you start targeting it after that to people like those who actually liked it.
Right. So rather than replacing the current model, you add a second phase.
A hybrid model, exactly, a 2-phase model, which is probably more like, I mean, that's actually what Steam's is right now,
right?
As far as we know, right? Is they show it to everybody, collect statistics, and then they pop it into these statistical queues like Netflix and show you things that you might like. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that something like what you've described as their new system is going to be good for that reason. I think it is going to result in increased sales for Steam.
Sure.
But I think this is probably one of the first changes that Steam, if this is what they do, one of the first changes that they'll have made that I think acts mostly in the best interest of Steam, not in developers. And frankly, not in players actually either, because players will buy more stuff, but they'll be buying more stuff like the stuff they already have. So they're not getting any diversity of experience. They're just seeing more things like they already have.
So is that where things like bundles could be useful, in that if you say you pick up, the Humble Indie bundle and it's just got 15 really different, really interesting games in there, and you pop those into your library and you start playing those, and you start pumping time into something that you wouldn't necessarily think that you would like.
Most people will buy bundles because they like a game in the bundle.
Yeah, and they never play the rest of them.
They never play the rest.
I mean, that's fair.
How many? Yeah, exactly.
That may or may not be true.
So, and we know from our own experiences that that's true, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that it just is true that if you show people stuff they probably don't want, they're not gonna get it, right? But the problem by just embracing that fact, like frankly all of the app stores have done, by trying to only show you things you'd be interested in and so on, is that you get accustomed to only ever seeing things that you are probably going to be interested in.
This is essentially the general problem with algorithmic driven.
It's
sourcing
the positive
of
feedback loop.
Yeah,
because if you get the soul,
or you lose some of that. It's the whole like variety is the spice of life situation.
Yeah, and if you get accustomed to being served up exactly what you would probably want, that's exactly the kind of experience you've already had over and over and over again. The moment that you get served something you aren't automatically by default interested in, you're absolutely going to reject it. But if you're shown a diversity of things so that you always have to be like consciously making a decision, do I actually care about this? Do I actually care about this? And so on, then it requires you to think for a second before you reject something.
This is starting to get deep, actually. This relates to so many things more than just games.
It does. It relates to your entire life.
Yes. Wow.
Because that's true with people too, because we go out and seek experiences like the ones we've already had.
Yeah.
And the more we have those experiences, the less we want other experiences.
It's very true. It's just super interesting to think about that, the more we curate, the more we let Netflix pump us full of, comedy specials and, documentaries about social change.
Same thing. Right.
Then you suddenly start. I mean, I've noticed this with myself. Like you were saying, you see all of these action shows, and then suddenly they throw something else in there. It's like, why the hell would I want to watch a rom-com right now? Like, what?
This isn't. And then I get mad at Netflix for having its algorithm wrong.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you're supposed to show me what I want, not this other stuff.
How dare you recommend this for me? Do you even know me? Netflix?
They're like, yeah, we know you very well.
Huge corporation who spies on my every move.
I probably would have enjoyed that rom-com. Because they recommended it to me for a reason, which is that people who mostly like pretty bad cop shows also like that show.
Yeah.
Was it The Notebook?
I cried like a baby at The Notebook.
I did not enjoy The Notebook. I have seen it. Did not enjoy it. I mostly don't enjoy rom-coms because it's always about a stalker being creepy as fuck.
Yeah. No, they're super sexist.
Yeah, it's horrible and gross, and I don't like it.
Well, I think so. It's an interesting thing though, because I think you talk about this sort of the idea of calcification of interests as you get older, and calcification of just your personhood. Like a lot of people have a hard time, really have a hard time sort of shifting direction of who they are as a person as they get older. And like the more you do the stuff you've been doing, the harder and harder that becomes for that exact reason. So it's interesting to me that we've slowly developed systems actually to reinforce this stuff, even the way Twitter works, for example. Like you follow people whose opinions are the same as yours for the most part. Facebook is kind of the same thing. You don't look at pictures of babies anymore because you're like, I don't like babies. Never show me babies again.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like the cutest baby picture in the universe, I would just reject out of hand because I've seen too many of it now.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting thing, right? Because it starts sort of narrowing your focus in a really curious way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's after the debates the other night, which we don't need to actually
We're
get
not going
into.
there.
But I noticed that like on all of my social media, all of my feeds were very like-minded. And it was super comfortable for me.
Yeah.
Because it was just nothing but people thinking the same things that I think. And it was nice. But at the same time, I was like, this is giving me this false sense of security.
Yeah.
That everyone in the world thinks the way that I do. And it's this sort of confirmation bias of just assuming that, I've surrounded myself by people with similar ideologies, but that can't be the actual.
Yeah. Well, I think the danger comes comes when you make, as you're saying, when you make the assumption that the stuff that you're seeing reflects the stuff
All
in
of
the
it.
world.
Right.
But if as long as you don't make that assumption, then maybe you're okay.
But
right?
the thing I'm saying is like that's a harder and harder thing to do because of the fact that literally, so if you look at Twitter, even your Google searches, everything now is not done in such a way as to surface any sort of variety in content.
Yeah.
Or variety in viewpoint.
It's to show you stuff you
want to see.
Yeah.
And so you end up running into this really weird problem where like, yeah, you could say as long as you're aware of the fact that this is happening, but I think that's not even the case because sure, you can be aware of it, but how can you possibly discount, like if I went to go Google search for something and I just get the same 10 results no matter sort of how I put in the question trying to figure out something, then that's the information I get, right? The first 3 links or whatever, you know.
But usually that's the information you needed.
Usually it is.
And well, but because this is the trade-off, right? Is if you get shown stuff that you want or the stuff that is probably what you're looking for, then you get exactly what you needed and you get it quickly, right? Mm-hmm. If we seed in there or have worse algorithms or whatever that basically throw diverse stuff at you, then you are confronted with noise all the time because for the most part, the stuff that you're looking at is not relevant. It's not something you're going to look into. And it makes actually just a worse overall experience for you. It does sort of confront you with the idea that there isn't just an answer, which is probably a good thing. But the blame is not usually cast on, because people have different opinions than me. The blame is cast on, well, Google's algorithm sucks, right? It's not showing me what I want to see. But I also want to get back to that idea that seeing like diverse political opinions, for example, as being a good thing, because it depends on what those, like I see no value whatsoever in having horrible racist stuff be visible to me, like being thrown onto my feeds and stuff,
true.
Right? I know that there is a large political faction who shall remain unnamed. That is racist and sexist and homophobic as fuck, right? Yeah. And I know that exists. I know it's horrible. Every time I'm confronted with it, I'm like, it's horrifying.
This is abhorrent.
Every time I see it, I know it exists, and I know there are many, many people who are horrible, exactly like that. I know it. I know it's there, but I don't need to see it, right? I don't need to have it. I don't need to follow a homophobe on Twitter to diversify the worldview that I see, right? Because I know that it's out there. But I think the value comes in following diverse viewpoints only when they are reasoned diverse viewpoints so that you can actually have a discussion. Sure. Because the problem with, especially something like politics, is that there's no reason there. It's just people spouting internalized beliefs and that's it. Without their goal isn't to come to a deeper understanding of the world. Their goal isn't to come to a consensus about how to approach a social justice problem, right?
Especially when it's a binary choice like this. It's there's not as much thought put into it as you would if there was a diversity of choices along with the diversity of opinions. Right.
So I think, and there are certain kinds of views that can be reasonable, even if people disagree, and that I think is absolutely worth exploring, and people need to be exposed to that. The problem is that the vast majority of stuff out there is just garbage nonsense being spouted. Right?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting to me in seeing diverse opinions along those lines is just understanding the mindset, understanding the mentality, understanding why, beyond just like, I mean, racism, sexism, and homophobia is a very clear reason why, in a lot of cases, why some people feel the way that they do. But for those people who I know who aren't that way, but still feel politically pulled in a certain direction, like that's what I'm curious to learn, like why, like what makes you make these decisions, why,
because then you can have a reasoned discussion. Right?
Exactly. And that's what's interesting to me, because whether or not I would change my mind, I still, my goal is to learn and understand as much about other people as possible and have an understanding of other people's experiences and reasoning. And so that is the only thing that like, I feel like might be lost in just a constant stream, because then you just feel like there's no point in discussing this anymore because we all feel the exact same way. And then it actually starts getting into discussions within the same ideologies, and that can actually start creating, because people always want to look for ways to start arguing about something. They're right and that you're wrong. Yeah. Like you feel slightly different than I do, even though we feel the exact same way. Right. So we're just going to. And
honestly, I avoid the echo chamber also. Yeah. Like I mostly, even though I'm very far left leaning, if I see somebody starting to spout left ideological viewpoints, I hide them immediately. Right. Because again, even if they're spouting stuff that I tend to agree with, they're doing it from a place of complete ignorance and nonsense. They're not thinking about things. They're just being like, ooh, this quote sounds nice. Like, look, everybody, Hillary's the best, right? And like they're not actually thinking about anything they're doing. And so there's no value to be gained there from seeing that kind of stuff. So I avoid the echo chamber. Most I'm just looking for what's happening in the world. So I have a sense of like kind of what's going on. And then otherwise I stick with stuff happening in the industry, trying to understand how are people selling games? What do people think about the most recent games news, right? And whatever. Because then there's now a thing that I can actually study and I can look at reasoned opinions about stuff. And fortunately, a lot of that, once you take it out of politics and stuff, then now it's about something that isn't so fucking polarizing, so that in general, the things that you hear people saying are now reasoned instead of completely insane.
I mean, there's plenty of interesting psych studies on this where it shows that when you have people actually get into a confrontation of some sort with regard to especially political ideology, it polarizes.
Yeah,
endlessly.
Oh yeah.
And this is the interesting thing I think about, because everyone's been talking about how in this particular election cycle, and even just the past like 8-ish years, the level of polarity in American politics in particular has been really kind of ratcheting off the charts a bit.
Yeah.
It's designed to be polarizing.
Well, the thing is, like, I think it's only partially that. I think the reality is that the tech that we use, like the idea of the echo chamber, right? The tech that we use is also, it's reinforcing in the same way that this whole positive feedback loop from like, what genres do you look at on Netflix or on Steam or whatever else? It's the same. It ends up being the same thing.
Well, and if you're the kind of person who doesn't think about things, right?
Well, I think it's a weird thing to sling around it, because I think most people trust that the systems that they put their faith in with regard to like who selects a movie for me, whatever else,
or
is that
what the
thing,
news is talking about.
Yeah, or what the news is talking about is that thing has been done in such a way as to make it done correctly, right?
Yeah.
So unbiased, ideally, in the journalistic sense.
Right.
But in the case
or
of
biased
Netflix,
in a way that feels fair somehow.
yeah,
right.
and I think the reality is that as you started seeing with the storefronts, with Netflix, whatever else, like the reality is that the sources are always working on algorithms that don't necessarily work in that for that specific value purpose, right? They're not necessarily driven by diversity of opinion or
they're gearing it toward their readers.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
gearing it toward what is going to create the most click-throughs and the most views.
Yeah.
And readers will actively just avoid the publications that they don't agree with.
which causes increased polarization.
Yeah,
right?
that's absolutely
which causes
right.
also those publications to lean more and more those polarized
'Cause you
directions,
end up having
because
a
they're serving
readership
up for their
that does-
clientele, because that's what they want.
Which is where the whole point with Steam comes in, right?
Right. And then to go back to this problem
Steam
of
politics.
as soon as you're confronting somebody who just doesn't think about the thing because they assume that what they're being served up is somehow fair, then that's really where the problem comes in. Right?
Yeah, but I think that's my point, is that the general idea that these things are not necessarily fairly served is not one that's been entered largely into the general mind of
Well,
people.
it
You know
is,
what I'm
but
saying?
only it's the other team
Yeah, right.
who's being
Right.
unfair, right?
As
Because
opposed to
somehow we're all on different teams
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to build a consensus together.
We all must be fighting everyone else.
Oh yeah,
Because if people are different than us, fuck them.
because humans. Anyways, let's move on to a few questions before we wrap this podcast
I
up.
would like to just clarify that was sarcasm.
That was, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. All right.
in case you could tell.
Questions.
All right, questions come from podcast@bscotch.net. You can ask them with your Bscotch ID or anonymously, but if you ask them with the Bscotch ID, you get a perk, which has a coffee mug on it. Very important.
It's
Very cool.
just like the coffee mugs that we drink from, but not at all. Actually.
So the first question comes from
In that it is a coffee mug.
It is a coffee mug.
With
There is
coffee in
coffee
it.
inside.
Yeah.
Although Andy does put butterscotch inside of his coffee.
That's true.
In his coffee. He mixes it in.
Inside
Yeah.
of.
Inside of.
Coffee is a vessel.
apparently it's
That sounds
delicious.
like a poem.
coffee is a vessel. All right, so first question comes from Nichirnu, who asks, do you guys play board games? And if so, what are your favorites?
Duh.
Oh yeah.
Talk about board games, nerds.
Nerds.
So I think my favorite board game that I have ever played is a little Fringe game called A Fake Artist Goes to New York. It's Japanese. Have you played this? We need to play it sometime because it's amazing.
A fake artist goes to New
A
York.
a
Fake
very
Artist
interesting
Goes
title.
to New York.
Uh-huh.
It's so good. It's made by a Japanese company, and so like none of it is in English.
It's got some rough SEO problems too,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
Like, how do you search
How do you
for
find it?
yeah, right.
There's a reason it's Fringe.
So the idea is that it's sort of like Pictionary, I guess. But so there's one person who is the artist curator, like the curator of the museum, and they pick a topic, any topic, and they write it down on all of these cards and give it to everybody at the table. So everybody has the same topic except one person has an X. And so then there's a piece of paper, everybody has a different colored marker, and there's a piece of paper that goes around the table. And everybody can draw one line to represent the topic. so that you just one contiguous line, and it goes around twice. So the person with the X has to pretend to know what it is that they're drawing to get away with being the fake artist. So everybody's drawing this artwork for this supposed New York museum.
But someone's just adding gibberish into it, basically.
So the idea is the museum curator wants the fake artist to get away with it, so that the topic needs to be simple enough that the fake artist can figure it out. But all the real artists want to out the fake artist and figure out who they are.
So it's like a strategy Pictionary, lying
hidden role sort of thing.
Yeah.
Weird.
It's absolutely brilliant. And actually, I mentioned this on a panel at Pixel Pop a couple of years ago and introduced it to a bunch of new people, and like everybody who picks it up absolutely loves it. And I've taken it to conventions and stuff. It's just the best time killing thing, and you just come up with such weird stuff.
It's pretty good
when you play. It's so good. So yeah, highly recommend.
I have a bunch of games that I really like. I tend to try out lots of different ones though, so I don't really have any favorites. But I think the one that I have the most fond experiences with, mostly because it was college time, which is full of fond experiences, is the Dune board game, which I think was made in like the 70s or 80s or something. It's out of print. I'm pretty sure you can still find really expensive copies on Amazon. But one of my friends had one, and so it's this very elaborate game it's got lots of steps to it, and it's got lots of lying and intrigue and politics, right? Just like the actual book Dune. And there are all these like hidden win conditions. So you choose you end up with a faction. Somebody might think they've won, but it turns out that your win condition was actually satisfied, so then you win instead.
Oh wow!
And so it's just very elaborate, really well crafted, cool game. And it takes place with a board on the on the planet of Dune, and so you're also traveling around trying to make things happen. And it's very cool and very well done. But it's so elaborate. I haven't played it in years and years. That it requires some hardcore nerds to like get together and really want to play it. To actually do it. So I have not had that opportunity in quite some time.
It sounds it kind of reminds me a little bit of Dead of Winter, in that everybody has their own win condition. Everybody has their own goal that they're trying to fulfill, and it's all completely hidden from the other players. Only in that pretty much everybody's on the same faction unless you're a zombie sympathizer, which may or may not exist.
There's a zombie sympathizer?
Yeah, there could be, depending on how many people you're playing with.
How does that even work?
Yeah.
There's a person for everything.
Yeah, there's someone who, like, for whatever reason, wants the zombies to take over in Dead of Winter. Clearly, it's a zombie game for those of you who haven't heard it. And it's similarly hidden role, but there's the possibility that somebody isn't that kind of opposing force. But even in that case, you're sort of suspicious of everybody who's on your team, because otherwise it's co-op, but you're still totally suspicious of everybody else who's trying to get their own little win condition fulfilled.
That's awesome. I think mine is Forbidden Desert.
Yeah. Also, there's another one, Forbidden Island.
Yeah, apparently
Where
the
they're
same sort of
basically the
idea,
same,
where you build the board out of these little tiles. And so it's like a 5x5 grid of these square tiles. And then you as the players essentially crash land on this sandy desert planet. And the thing you're fighting is actually a PvE game as a board game, which I think part of the reason I probably like it so much is it's actually one of the first co-op board games I played. So it's really cool because there's a storm raging that slowly picks up over time, and it occupies a space on the board. And every time it moves, it dumps a piece of sand onto that board piece. And so you and your people have to you have to spend energy to dig out. You have to spend energy to find.
And you collaborate on every move. So it's still turn-based, but every time it's your move, like everybody's discussing, figuring out what the best move is for that player.
And everybody has a specific role. And so they have a specific skill set that they can use. Yeah. And so I think one of my favorite ones is when we were in the hospital, we played Forbidden Desert a lot. And I was playing as the navigator. And the navigator's trick is that they can use one of their action points. You get 4 action points, and they can use one of theirs to move someone else 3 spaces. And so we had the situation where like the storm was rolling in, and somehow the game balances itself such that you always just barely win when you win.
I love that. That's the best designed PvE
it's
kind
incredible.
Of board game.
Yeah, so there's always stories coming out of it. And we had this one where I ended up flinging 2 people to the ship using my skills, and then hid out in a cave. And then the next time someone jump jetted me or something like that, jump jetted to me, and then I jump jetted with them back to the ship or something like that. And so it was this crazy, it was like a 10-minute discussion to figure out exactly how to do it.
Doing the logic puzzle based on all the turns coming up.
It was so fun. So we got Forbidden Desert, a fake artist goes to New York, Dead of Winter, and Dune.
Yeah.
Those are suggestions, right?
Oh,
cool.
And just a little plug. We didn't mention this, but my card game has the book, a game of corporate responsibility management, just got accepted into the Indie Showcase.
Which is awesome. Yeah.
So check that out.
Where is that? Where are you going to be for that?
It's in LA. So it's the Indie is at USC. and it's an official selection for the table games. So if you're going to be there, come play it. I'll be there demoing all weekend. It's going to be awesome.
Cool. Okay. Last question, I think, based on how much time we got left.
Yeah, let's see what do we got. I think I started the timer 5 minutes late, so we're sitting at. We got about 10 minutes left.
Classic. All right,
We
do
can
a few
hit
more
a question or two.
This next question comes from Peace and Bullets, which is a great
Peace
name.
and bullets.
Peace and Bullets.
Hmm.
Who asks, how many more games are you going to create before you smash all your characters into go-karts and make a Butterscotch Universe racing game? And he said,
Or a brawler.
3. Yeah, or a brawler.
Or a party game.
Or
And
a
he's-
party game.
Okay, here's a question. What sort of game, what genre of game would you want to make where we mash all of our characters
MOBA.
together? You want to make a MOBA?
Hell no.
Oh, God.
I do want a party game. I think that would be a lot of fun. Mario
Yeah.
Party is like one of the best.
Mario Party is incredible.
And WarioWare.
WarioWare, so good. Oh my God.
Okay, so you think more like a party game, less like a racing game.
Well, racing would be good too.
Racing's so fun.
Yeah, racing is fun. Yeah, I don't know. I think the in terms of just from a game design perspective, party games are great because it's all about just like fun and gleeful stuff, and you know, so it doesn't really matter if it's perfectly balanced. It doesn't matter if it feels fair. It just matters if if you have a really good time playing it. And so in some respects, making it quite unbalanced actually increases the fun, right? But a racing game, it's got to be really balanced.
Yeah,
because if that feels unfair, even a little bit.
But if you think about the blue shell in Mario, that shit's not fair in any stretch.
That's designed to create fairness.
Yeah, because otherwise, when you get in the lead, you can't be taken out of the lead.
Yeah, this is one of the issues back with my old studio at Happy Badgers. We were working on a racing game, and they still are. And that was one of the biggest points of playtest feedback is how, if I'm knocked way back to the back of the race, how am I supposed to be able to catch up? What kind of rubber banding is set in place? And so that's kind of what made us discover that all of those goodies in Mario Kart are specifically designed to help balance.
Yeah, and they're weighted so that if you're in the very back of the line, you get things like the bullet that bring you up, and you get things like a blue shell and knock the leader out of the front.
Yeah, very much.
And if you're like in second place, though, you get things that are kind of like undirected, right? Like the green shells and stuff, because like at that point you're close enough anyway. We don't want to, because then it feels unfair if like you're in second place
red shell
and you nuke, the front guy with the blue shell. So they use those things to add balance to the game, because otherwise, a racing game, unless it's really highly skill based, like a lot of more realistic ones, where if you just take a turn slightly wrong, then you fuck it up and now you're like not in the lead anymore, and everybody's really tight anyway. But something like Mario Kart, if you're in the lead, you can just stay in the lead. And if you're a little bit better than everybody else, you just keep on extending that lead. And so,
power slides, man.
Yeah,
it's all about the power slides
and memorizing the course and all that, right? And so I think there's something really valuable in having games that don't make it so that somebody can just be the best at them.
You got a lot of elasticity.
Because, and this actually goes back to the thing about like Forbidden Desert and Forbidden Island being really fun because they're player versus environment. So it's a cooperative game. Because like, I don't know, I think having winning be a thing you strive for, I think is just shitty in games, Like, why have that be the valuable end result instead of in the end, like, well, we all survived and we had a great time together, right? Instead of, oh, damn it, I lost this time because you did better than me.
It creates an unnecessary tension for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about that. Like, there's a lot of people who really like competition, and they feed off of that energy that competition gives.
But they can
them.
only play with other people exactly like that.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just horribly frustrating.
I used to, one of the things I remember happening was when I was sort of finding new friends in college, is that I would invite them over to play Super Smash Brothers. And I could tell within like 5 minutes if it was the sort of person I wanted to actually be around long term because of their reactions to how they handled winning and losing. Because some people, when they win, are like mean about it.
I am.
Yeah.
And some people, when they lose, are also mean about it.
Yeah.
Some people are half and half. They'll pick one of those things to be sore about.
But it's kind of the problem with this kind of a game, though, right? Is if you don't, because they're designed to have, a winning component, because the more skillful you are, the more you can win, right? So either you have to care a lot about winning to play the game well, because then you have to practice because you want to win, right? Which then typically makes you have less fun when you play when you're not winning.
Yeah.
Or you have to not give a shit about winning, which is like my case. Which then removes all incentives for you to like practice and be really good at it. So then you just lose constantly, which even if you don't really care about winning, becomes really boring.
Yeah.
After a while, right? Where you just come in, you're like, I don't know what's happening, and you get crushed and repeatedly.
I mean, I would argue that any multiplayer game is not going to be boring as long as you're spending time with people.
Yeah, unless those people care about winning.
Yeah, that's true. That is fair.
Yeah.
But so
but then a game where that's a competitive game that you play with people where nobody cares about winning, it's not even fucking co-op game.
competitive.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely
then it's
true.
not fun anymore anyway.
I feel like I'm somewhere in between that because I grew up with a very competitive household with very competitive siblings, but I'm bad at video games.
So you've had to sort of ratchet it down a little
Yeah,
bit.
so it's like just like lower your expectations, And so it's really interesting when we play Rocket League. I never expect to win, and so when I do, I'm like, "Fuck yes,
Yeah, right.
this is the best!" But I think it took me a while to train myself that like winning wasn't important because I think I used to be one of those people that was a huge asshole, either whether I won or lost. It's just kind of like that natural gamer reaction, right? Of
Competitive reaction, yeah.
Hell yeah, I'm better than you, sucker! Or, oh, fuck you, you're better than me,
Right.
sucker! Like,
Either way, you're upset. It's a weird condition,
yeah.
you know?
And so it definitely takes some maturity and some training. So, but I do love that about any game, any collaborative or competitive game, is that it teaches you so much about the people that you're playing with.
I mean, I still think one of my favorite ones, and I still highly recommend it, is Super Mario for the Wii. Adam and I used to play the shit of that. And I play that with one or two friends in school. And it was always the most fun because it's completely cooperative. Like your point is to get to the end of the level, but you accidentally murder each other constantly. And like there's something about that particular element of it where it ends up being, if you're with people who aren't those like winner focused, where they're okay with dying essentially and dying by the cause of their friends, then it ends up being this basically just this laugh fest the entire time because you're just murdering.
Well, because you're collaborating, but then one of you fucks up,
right?
And
it's just amusing, right?
You're collaborating into murder.
Yeah.
I have to say, my absolute favorite co-op experience is Octodad on co-op.
Oh yeah,
you and I played.
Yeah, we played those. Hilarious. Yeah,
and it's just like that's that same level of frustration where
it's because you control different limbs.
Yeah, you're controlling one guy, you're controlling the Octodad, and especially if you set it right, it just switches up limbs every single checkpoint, and so you're constantly talking, you're constantly communicating about what limb you're controlling, but it's so frustrating. Because it's already hard to control Octodad.
Right.
Yeah.
But then when you're controlling it with two different people on four different limbs.
And they're shifting all the time.
It's really interesting to see how people collaborate during that.
Cool. All right, next question comes from Kevin 88888, who asks, is it possible to make a new genre of game these days? Yes or no? No discussion, yes or no.
I guess the first question is, what does a genre even mean?
Answer the question, Adam. Yes or no?
I'm going to go with yes, because the question doesn't mean anything.
All right, Adam.
Or also no, because it doesn't mean anything.
Points don't exist.
Will all games be lumped into an existing category? Yes or no? I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means?
Is that the same question?
This is a follow-up question. There's three questions here.
Of the new genre?
Will all games be lumped into an existing category? Probably
like
as in if you make a game in a new genre, does it get
so here's what
into
I think genre just means an overall game experience that feels sufficiently different from everything else. That consequently, lots of people clone that thing. And so now kind of the predecessor of that, somebody comes up with a word or a kind of a collection of words that sort of summarizes the essence of that thing.
They did
right?
Dune. Was it Dune that was the first person shooter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the first big one, right? That really blew up.
Yeah.
Roguelike is the most hilarious genre name.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't mean a goddamn thing.
It just means that when you die, you get set back somehow.
It means
nowadays
that the game is like Rogue.
Well, it's supposed to be. It was the original meaning, right?
Right.
But it doesn't actually mean that anymore.
Yeah, because now you see because for example, because we called like Quadrupus is roguelike.
Right.
And people are like, yeah, makes sense. But if you compare it to Rogue, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right?
It's nothing like Rogue.
It's mainly about permadeath, right?
Right.
Like it really all it is a permadeath signifier.
Yeah.
But even that is loose because there's shades of that you can use, right?
Yeah, because you might start over literally from scratch, or you might start over having upgraded some meta game content or something.
So the whole point is, but though it's a heuristic, right? So genre is a heuristic for people.
Yeah.
So when you say, can you create a new genre of game? It really is about, the question really to me ends up being, is it possible to create something that's far enough afield from everything that currently exists that you have to come up with a new term for it?
Right.
Or then in the case of, the most easiest recent example to me, but this is League of Legends, as far as like a MOBA, but that actually came from Dota, which was itself a MOBA, but that was a thing that moved
actually
out of an
from
RPG.
from a mod for
Warcraft. For Warcraft, yeah. Which came from, but that's essentially a modification of an RPG, right? So the thing is, kind of like our conversation earlier, about sort of taking baby steps out of a particular area to slowly get into a more diverse place.
Well, it was actually a modification to an RTS.
Right.
originally. and
Well,
then
which itself.
that had some RPG in
Exactly.
it, and then they sort of focused on that. And it's
So-
very weird. You
I'm
just
just going to say there's a lot of acronyms being thrown around right now.
Yeah. Well, the point is, I think you can make a new genre game. I think you can.
It just means doing something new.
New enough.
New enough.
New enough that if someone else did
You can't
it,
make
that
a new
they,
genre on purpose.
Well, here's the thing though. If it was new enough that someone else made a game that was like your game, that they said that you cloned it.
Right.
I think that sort of is the
So 2048 is a threes like.
yeah.
It's a threes like.
It's a threes like.
And and I think like so if you take, but the thing is, you can do a new thing and then somebody can go clone it, but you can't do that on purpose because the part that makes it a genre is other people taking an idea and then giving you credit for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if, for example, all of a sudden a whole bunch of games start coming out that have inventory, but it's infinite, and somebody was like, "Hey, I think Crashlands was kind of the first one to do this," then they'd start calling it a Crashlands like,
Right.
Right.
But really, all that would mean is infinite inventory.
Exactly. It would mean exactly one little piece in the same way that roguelike means permadeath, even though Rogue itself, of course, had a lot more components than that. But that was the item that like they did that really was super interesting to people that they pulled out as a game mechanic and put in lots of other stuff. And there are other implications of that genre as well, but the only one you need to call it a roguelike is the permadeath. So yeah, I think also procedural generation, those two things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we're out of time.
Yep.
Probably.
Good.
We're going to call it.
All right. Well, that was it for this week's podcast. As always, share it around. Tell your friends. Tell your babies, who we will not see pictures of. Tell your dog.
Don't let your babies listen to this episode because we were really mean to babies.
We were kind of mean to babies. I'm sorry, babies.
It's okay that they don't understand because they're so dumb. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye.